Magnesium is one of the most important nutrients in the body because it's a cofactor for over 300 enzymatic reactions. In today's show, we're going to do a deeper dive into magnesium as it's related to aging and the gender-specific applications for magnesium. It turns out that women, particularly women who are trying to get pregnant or who are actively breastfeeding and who are going through menopause, need more magnesium than at other times of their life and possibly more than men. We're also going to talk about the magnesium changes throughout aging, and then also talk about different forms of magnesium and what foods contain highest amounts of magnesium. And actually, look, I got a master's degree in nutrition, and so I thought that I knew a lot about magnesium, and I was kind of surprised. I'm like, wow, most of the foods that I eat actually have no amount of magnesium in it. So let's dive into some of the quotes from this paper. And this is a narrative review. This is not a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. This is just an analysis of the available peer-reviewed, published academic literature. The title of this paper is Magnesium Matters, a comprehensive review, its vital role in health and disease. The paper goes on to talk about how magnesium is an important cofactor for, as I mentioned, for more than 300 enzymatic reactions, facilitating the conversion of ATP to ADP for energy production. Moreover, magnesium is essential for the proper functioning of ion channels, particularly calcium channels, and this is really important for muscular contractions and in the brain. Influencing nerve transmission and muscle relaxation. Magnesium is naturally found in a wide array of foods, with green leafy vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes being particularly rich sources. Additionally, certain fortified foods and dietary supplements provide elemental magnesium, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's the thing about deficiency. This deficiency of magnesium is more commonly observed in women compared to men. I think this is really important for folks to understand, because I see a lot of dudes like, yeah, I take 600 milligrams of magnesium, bro. And I don't really hear women talk about magnesium. I mean, of course, some women do, but I think when women think about supplements that they must take, especially women of reproductive age, they might think about B12 and folate for preventing spinal bifida and things like that. They might think about iron, but I don't know that magnesium is really on the radar for some folks. And we'll get into the different organic versus inorganic forms of magnesium and which forms are better and all the stuff in a minute. But I think it's important to understand that there is a gender difference here. And this discrepancy may be partially attributed to estrogen's role for enhancing tissue magnesium utilization, suggesting that hormonal fluctuations in women may influence and regulate magnesium homeostasis or balance. And so suboptimal magnesium status is a concern for both women as well as men. Now, it's important to recognize, and we know this, that magnesium is widely present in certain foods, but the content of the magnesium in those foods depend upon how that food is grown, such as soil quality, irrigation, fertilizers, preservation methods, food processing techniques, and so forth. And there was a report, I think it was from UT Austin, going back in the late 90s, that found that, and the USDA database has actually found this, that quantities of essential minerals and micronutrients in foods have been progressively declining over time. And so we've known this, we've seen this. And so this is why dietary supplements are so popular, because most people are eating, processed foods, not whole foods, not fermented foods, things like that. And the soils are not as good as they were. We're doing a lot of tilling and all this, regenerative agriculture. I know it's like a kitchen table topic now, but most people are not eating food grown via those techniques. And so this is where supplements come in. And I think it's really important. Now, before we continue and go on about the roles that magnesium plays in the brain and in the musculature and its important influence on blood sugar balance, I just want to pause. I want to thank you all for being here. Appreciate your likes, your comments, your shares. And I want to thank this video show sponsor, the folks over at BondCharge.com, the makers of an array of amazing health promoting tools. I love their at-home infrared sauna blanket. We've talked about that a lot, but they make some of the best blue light filtering glasses on the market. Now, if you're like me, you have to be on your computer for work, for your job, for your social connections. And we know that these LED screens can become problematic and can strain your eyes, and they can accelerate the aging of your eyes. And even worse, they can compromise your sleep quality and sleep duration if you're using screens at night without protection. So it's really important to especially, we're ending summer, we're transitioning out of summer into fall, which means the days are going to be getting shorter, the nights are going to be getting longer, and you're more likely going to expose your body to artificial light, which can perturb your circadian clock system, melatonin release, hormone balances, and beyond. So that's why I recommend going to bondcharge.com/HIH and saving on their amazing blue light filtering glasses. I've been wearing the Bond Charge blue light filtering glasses for over 10 years now. I swear by these. I love them, especially if you're doing an evening or nighttime travel, you're in an airport, you're on a train or a bus or a plane, like you got to be wearing blue light filtering glasses to minimize circadian rhythm disruption. So definitely check out the link, bondcharge.com/HIH to save, or click the link in the description below. Your body and your future self will thank you for it. Okay, so getting back to magnesium, I think it's important for us to understand what the heck does magnesium do in the body? Like we hear about this all the time. Like, oh, I take all this magnesium and I should be all this. Well, why? Like, what does it really do? I mean, it's one thing to know that magnesium is involved and is a cofactor for 300 enzymatic reactions, but like, how does that influence you and why should you really care? Well, it turns out that it's really important for about 6 major functions in the body. The metabolic effects, I think, are really important. So, I'm a metabolic health guy. So magnesium modulates insulin sensitivity, especially during hormonal fluctuations in women. Like during the luteal phase of the cycle, for example, women should probably take more magnesium because estrogen, it turns out, as we learned earlier, influences the absorption and utilization of magnesium. So we know that during the luteal phase is a low estrogen phase for women who are still cycling. And so that's a time when you would want to increase your magnesium intake for women. We know that magnesium deficiency impacts PMS-related symptoms and also metabolic stability in women. But in both men and women, magnesium supports insulin sensitivity, glucose regulation, and testosterone balance. And it also affects overall metabolic and blood sugar efficiency and health. Now, of course, we know magnesium and muscle because the muscles in the form of magnesium for musculoskeletal health that has been shown to be most beneficial is magnesium malate. But magnesium is involved in bone mineralization, and deficiency in magnesium can lead to postmenopausal increases in osteoporosis risk. Okay, so magnesium is important for the bone. It's also very important for the integrity of muscle. And so I do suggest if you work out a lot that you might want to take magnesium malate around exercise or in your electrolyte or some such thing. So that's important. It turns out that there's research showing that magnesium deficiency is linked with sarcopenia in men as they get older. So that's important. So we've talked about the metabolism, we've talked about the bone and the muscle, but what about the brain, right? We all care about our brain. Well, it turns out that magnesium helps regulate numerous neurotransmitters that impact your mood. And so I think this is really important. Also, neuromuscular balance. And so folks that are kind of wobbly or unstable may want to consider as they get older having more magnesium. If you're worried about your aging parents or your grandparents falling and tripping, maybe give them some magnesium. Really low cost. I mean, this is one of the most affordable minerals, depending upon which source you get in which form. And we'll dive into that in just a moment. Magnesium is also involved with, this is really important, migraines and headaches. So if you're susceptible to having migraines and having recurring headaches and things of the sort, you definitely want to consider taking magnesium because it's involved in the regulation of calcium homeostasis or calcium balance in the brain. And that can manifest from a symptom standpoint as a migraine. Muscular strength and function within the peripheral nervous system, magnesium status is important. Now, we've talked about the brain, we've talked about the bone, the muscle, the metabolism. Well, what about body fat? Well, it turns out that there is a connection between body mass index, body fat percentage, and magnesium status in the body. There's several papers finding a correlation between magnesium deficiency and increased body weight and body mass index. So I think that's important. So individuals with higher amounts of visceral fat have a correlation with lower magnesium levels. Now, the chicken versus the egg story is not totally sussed out. Is it the magnesium deficiency that is causing the metabolic disturbances that is causing the increased body fat accumulation? Or is it the hyperpalatable foods that are obviously, have low amounts of magnesium that have led to the visceral adiposity and the changes. Not really sure, but there is a correlation with magnesium insufficiency and an increased body fat accumulation, as well as increased inflammation. But this is interesting in men. It turns out that higher visceral fat accumulation is linked with an inverse association between magnesium intake and waist circumference. So, one study found, I can't remember if this was a prospective cohort study. I don't think this was an RCT, where individuals took magnesium over time. And I don't know if there was a placebo group, but it was associated with a small and relatively insignificant, statistically speaking, amount of weight loss compared to other folks. But there tends to be an epidemiological association between higher magnesium intakes and lower amounts of visceral fat and waist circumference. So that's just something to be aware of, something to be mindful of, because again, a lot of people are looking for the magic fix when it comes to weight loss. This is very low cost, very accessible. Okay, well, what about just for other life stages, getting older or having children and things like that? I think it's important that magnesium requirements increase during both pregnancy and lactation, as well as menopause for women, because the hormonal fluctuations of having a baby, of breastfeeding, and going through menopause causes perturbations in magnesium balance within the body. Now, for men, more physically active men, young athletes, CrossFit or high rocks competitors and so forth, increases the magnesium needs for men. And so I think it's important that, if you're physically active, and all people should be, but men for sure, you're definitely going to need more magnesium. And it turns out that in both men and women, aging reduces the absorption efficiency and increases the urinary loss of magnesium. So as you get older, you might need more magnesium. And so, how much should we be getting? Well, it's on the low end, 320 milligrams per day for women, and for men, it's closer to 400 milligrams per day. And based upon this table right here that you're looking at, that's going to be hard to do for a lot of people, especially if you're not eating almonds, pine nuts, cashews, or chocolate. It turns out that most of the magnesium that we're getting in our diet is from nuts or grains, and some leafy greens has a decent amount of magnesium, but not a whole lot. And again, it depends upon the organic nature, sprayed with pesticides, not soil quality, all that. But just look at this table and just ask yourself, well, do I eat any of these foods? And if you don't, you should consider supplementing with magnesium. And so, this is, I think, one criticism of a carnivore style diet is you're not going to be getting much magnesium. And so, yeah, I think this is really interesting. And in fact, one of the best sources, and I'm saying this with a caveat as well, one of the best sources of magnesium, it turns out, is quinoa and wheat, and also oats. I don't generally recommend people eat a lot of oats because they're sprayed and dried with glyphosate, as many of you know, unless they're certified glyphosate free. We know that quinoa, I used to, when I was doing the raw vegan thing, I had quinoa all the time. It comes out the same way it comes in, my friend. So I don't know that you absorb that much quinoa. Maybe your body's a little bit different, but I've talked to a lot of people about quinoa. And so, when it comes to other grains that are high in magnesium, you see wheat here and also brown rice. Well, most people are not eating wheat that has been properly fermented via the sourdough fermentation process that we've discussed at length with Dr. Beryl Schindler. And we know that most of the nutrients that are found in wheat and flour are inaccessible to the human body because they have not been properly fermented. Because what happens, as many of you know, in the wheat germ and so forth, there's a compound known as phytic acid, and phytic acid binds up and makes these minerals inaccessible to human digestion unless they are properly fermented by wild yeast and wild bacteria. And this is why so many people are excited about sourdough pancakes, sourdough bread, sourdough crackers, sourdough pizza, all this stuff, because the fermentation process increases the bacterial breakdown of the wheat product that makes it lower glycemic index. It makes it more digestible, the phytates and the anti-nutrients that are there, but it also makes phytic acid, enzymes that break down phytic acid, so phytase enzymes, and thereby increasing the accessibility of the zinc, of the magnesium, of the iron, of the manganese, of all the micronutrients that are found in wheat. that is made more accessible by way of the fermentation process. So just because you're like, well, I eat wheat, I eat bread. Well, has it been fermented? Well, if it hasn't been properly fermented via the sourdough fermentation process, you may not be getting the minerals that you think you should be getting from the grains. Okay, so going on down the list. Now, when we look at spinach and Swiss chard, they are actually quite high in their magnesium. But here's the downside. And I'm not trying to be anti-green leafy vegetable, guys. We know that spinach and Swiss chard have high amounts of oxalates, which can be particularly problematic and can contribute to arthritic joint pain and other challenges, and the least of which is a kidney stone. But oxalates can be incredibly toxic. It seems that certain people are more susceptible than others and so forth. So that's the challenge there. Is I'm going to err on the side of soaked and sprouted nuts, fermented whole grains, over, say, green leafy vegetables. It turns out that fish and seafood is a decent source of magnesium. Dairy products are lower, but also they're a different source. But here's the cool part is dark chocolate. Well, if you have chocolate that is greater than 70% cocoa content, guess what? It has a solid amount of magnesium in there. Actually, it rivals almonds, which I think is really cool. So yeah, the other thing that I think is important to understand about magnesium is the connection between magnesium and vitamin D. And for a long time, I sort of, didn't pay a lot of attention to this. I wasn't really sure about the mechanistic connection between magnesium and vitamin D. But as you can see from figure 1 here, this was a recently published study highlighting, again, part of the reason why magnesium is so popular as a dietary supplement is, it's an enzymatic cofactor for over 350 enzymes within the body. It's involved as a cofactor for the vitamin D binding protein, the 25-hydroxylase enzyme, which converts pre-vitamin D to 25-hydroxy vitamin D. And it's also involved in the kidney and in different kidney functions as well. So it turns out that you should have decent magnesium status if you want to have optimal vitamin D function as well. So going into the cold and flu season, a lot of people think about zinc and they think about like elderberry and stuff and want to get their vitamin D levels up. Well, you should also consider increasing your magnesium intake, which is where I want to finish up and talk about different sources and forms and so forth. Well, when it comes to magnesium forms, you have your inorganic versus organic forms. The inorganic forms, and this doesn't have to do with organic certifications. This has to do with the structure of the compound. In organic chemistry, if it has a carbon atom, it's organic. If it doesn't, it's called inorganic. So you have inorganic chemistry and organic chemistry. And so a lot of companies will actually sell inorganic forms of magnesium, like magnesium carbonate, magnesium oxide, magnesium citrate, magnesium gluconate. These are magnesium sulfate. These are magnesiums that are known to not have the best absorption. And this is exactly why if you're constipated, it's recommended that you take magnesium citrate because it's so poorly absorbed that it will actually draw more water into your colon and increase the probability that you'll have a successful bowel movement. So I think that's important to recognize and understand. The different sources and forms of inorganic magnesiums that are not totally recommended. Now, the 3 to 5 forms that I generally recommend in terms of considering when you're looking at a magnesium supplement, magnesium bisglycinate chelate. So magnesium bound to 2 molecules of glycine. So what makes this special or unique? Well, glycine is a really important amino acid that exerts a lot of beneficial physiologic functions in the body. And so taking magnesium with glycine can be helpful because glycine does so many things. And so this is really common. Magnesium bound to malate. Well, malic acid, it turns out, is a really important Krebs cycle nutrient, is a cofactor. So magnesium malate is important. It turns out that magnesium malate might be the best form of magnesium for your skeletal muscle. Just remember malate, muscle, M and M corresponding together. So I think that's important, magnesium malate. We also have magnesium taurate. So magnesium taurate is sort of emerging newly as maybe a better form of magnesium compared to other forms, and particularly magnesium acetyl taurate or taurinate, the ATA mag, that has been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and improve symptoms related to migraines and headaches and things of the sort. So that's important to understand there. Magnesium L-threonate, This has been long studied to improve calcium homeostasis in the brain and possibly improve memory, concentration, and focus in the brain and beyond. So magnesium L-threonate has been shown to be helpful as well. So those are the forms that I suggest you consider. Again, glycinate, you have malate, you have taurinate or acetyltaurinate and threonate. Those are the magnesium forms. There's all these other, novel compounds that are coming on the market. I don't think you need a lipolyzed magnesium or any enhanced absorption. And I also don't think that there's other companies that are saying, well, you need 11 forms of magnesium, you need this and that. Those companies are also selling magnesium oxide, magnesium sulfate, magnesium gluconate, these inorganic forms of magnesium that don't really have, when you're ultimately, magnesium is a salt, just like sodium chloride. Salts ionize in the body. And so when you're taking a salt, you want to consider the healthful mineral like magnesium, but also when it ionizes, what is that compound going to do for you? In the context of citrate or aspartate, magnesium aspartate, what are those going to do for you? Whereas when you think about magnesium glycinate or magnesium malate, or you think about magnesium taurinate, taurine's good for you. Malic acid is a Krebs cycle intermediate compound. Glycine is good for the body. Taurine, obviously great. So that's where I suggest you focus. Now, people will talk about, well, when do I take magnesium? I think twice a day is decent. You can do 150 milligrams in the morning, 150 milligrams at night, for example. If you like taking powder, it's a much more affordable, cost-effective way to take magnesium versus just capsules. So it really depends on what you like, So hopefully you got some value from this video, this overview of magnesium, that it's a really important cofactor. It does a lot of things for the skeletal muscle, for the metabolism, for the brain. Obviously, there's gender differences with estrogen and beyond. And, a lot of foods that you probably eat don't contain magnesium, so you may want to consider supplementing with that. So I appreciate you tuning all the way to the very end. Appreciate your likes, your comments, your shares. If you have any magnesium specific questions that I might be able to help you out with, let me know and I'll try to address those in the comments section below. And we'll catch you on a future video down the road.